On the Regenerative Health podcast today, I am interviewing Jess Brosnan. Now, she is a naturopath and a specialist in implementing circadian biology and its practical lifestyle behaviors and modifications as it relates to children and to women, pregnant women, babies, and families. So, Jess, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about chatting all about this.
Yeah, so I see children in my clinical practice, and you obviously see children every day in your group and online coaching, and think that this is an area of health. And I use the term health to really mean the whole kind of public health and the health of the world that is so underappreciated and so just simply misunderstood, that it's almost remarkable, and therefore the opportunity is so great to help people and improve so many conditions. So maybe explain to us how you explain the idea of circadian rhythms to your clients, and why are circadian rhythms so important for kids and families.
Yeah, oh wow. So I just developed this big passion to really shift the health paradigm for our kids, right? So we can have these happy, healthy, thriving, connected kids. And so I have fallen into teaching mothers basically how to sync their child's circadian rhythm to help them set up this foundation of, optimal sleep, great energy, thriving hormones, and then that leads into the longevity, like their long-term health. And this really includes, honoring the light and dark cycles from sunrise to sunset. So let's have a look. I mean, in regards to why circadian rhythms are important for our kids, I think, our children's circadian rhythms and their mitochondria, which is, the energy powerhouses of their cells, really plays this significant role in our child's health. So everything from sleep to brain development to hormone production, so much more. So if we think about sleep, which I generally see a lot of mothers coming to me about their kids' sleep. So if their child has a healthy functioning circadian rhythm and mitochondria, then it allows them to have this regulated sleep pattern. The child is able to fall asleep without their brains being so wired, but their bodies being so tired. It ensures, healthy amounts of melatonin, which is their sleep hormone. What else? It helps to have that deep quality sleep. And, this is really important for our children. This is when their bodies are able to repair and heal when it's nighttime. Also, helps to regulate a child's nervous system, which is, so important to have good mental and emotional health. And then, things like their hormone, their hormones, the correct balance and release of hormones at the right time of the day. And this is important for all ages, but particularly for kids who are going through puberty. And then other things, like a strong, healthy immune system, healthy digestion and metabolism, which is really good for, good gut health. And then I think finally, to sum it up, having a good, healthy rhythm and good habits, that is really going to lead them in the right direction to adulthood. And this includes having healthy rhythms to start their morning, and then for kids to actually wind down. This is going to support the healthy functioning of, their well-being in their body right and through into adulthood. It's basically setting the foundations for these kids.
Yeah, I really love that framing. I think it is fundamentally setting a foundation for a healthy lifestyle into their childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. We are, and I use the term we kind of very broadly, modern society has found a lot of ways to disrupt humans and therefore children's circadian rhythm. Explain from your point of view what society's done wrong to basically put a spanner in the works of this critically important bodily function.
Yeah, we live in this tech-driven world that is literally saturated in artificial light. Like, we are quite literally bathing ourselves and our children in artificial light 24/7, with these big bright lights that are causing this internal circadian storm inside our children that we can't even see. And, I'm not surprised by the conversations that I hear now where kids are up all night long playing video games and they can't get to sleep without an iPad, going to bed with an iPad and then needing to wake up during the night to get back on their iPad. Like, these conversations used to shock me a couple of years ago when I heard them, but now they have become so normal that nothing really shocks me anymore. And I think that, I would say the four, which I've kind of like pulled all together, and what I've listened to the mothers that are coming to my page and what I've understood is that the four biggest contributors to our children's ill health and these ailments that they're experiencing is lack of sunlight, this addiction to technology, because technology is incredibly addictive, especially for young developing brains. And then disconnection to nature, because our kids are getting less than an hour on average of time outdoors these days. And then excessive saturation and exposure to blue light at night. I feel that these are the foundations that are really causing these kids to have all sorts of different health ailments and the ill health of our children today. And the thing is, they are all preventable.
Yeah, and I really think that the behaviors or the environment that the child is in is reflecting the adult's environment, and it reflects the environment that adults are kind of cultivating for their kids. Just like the kid's going to eat, if the parents put Coca-Cola in the bottle, the kid's going to drink Coca-Cola. If the parents are blaring a massive widescreen TV and having everyone's got an iPad or a device at 8 p.m. at night, then the kids are going to really do the same. So I think it's just another unintentional way that parents are actually unknowingly sabotaging their children's health.
Yeah, 100%. And, we're all just doing the best that we can do with the tools that we have. And like this knowledge, this wisdom of circadian rhythms, I call it a remembering, because our biology is never going to change. Like, this is the way that our biology works, and that's in partnership with the sun, right? So that's never, ever going to change. But we have forgotten along the way how our biology works in partnership with nature and with the sun. And when we honor that, that is when we thrive in our health and well-being. And the more that we disconnect from that, the more that we are seeing these, crazy health ailments in our children.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into the exact kind of different diseases or different conditions, developmental disorders that are probably both causally linked to circadian disruption, artificial light at night, sunlight and vitamin D deficiency, but also greatly exacerbated because they lie on the causal pathway. So they're both going to be a cause and an exacerbation. I want to make a quick reference to an earlier podcast when I interviewed Dr. Jack Cruz, who a lot of people who are going down this light and circadian rhythm rabbit hole will know about. And if you haven't heard of his work, then go back and listen to my earlier podcast with him and some of his other podcasts on YouTube. But he made the amusing but and maybe slightly hyperbolic, but I don't actually think it's hyperbolic when you understand the circadian biology. He said giving your kid an iPad, like the digital babysitter, at night is the equivalent of kicking the what out of them in the middle of Sydney Airport. And it's a characteristic delivery by Dr. Cruz, but that kind of speaks to the impact of really disrupting this finely tuned hormonal balance that is so dependent on light dark signals. And I've talked about it at length, which is we need both. We need the bright sunlight during the day, which you mentioned as kids are being sunlight deficient, but we also need absence of light at night, and that I mean, they got to be very, very close in terms of, ways that people are kind of unintentionally doing things wrong. Because, as you've said, this tech addiction is leading us to spend all day inside and to light up the night in the way that it hasn't previously been.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so addictive even for adults, right? Like even adults struggle to contain themselves with not waking up first thing and checking and scrolling their phone. Like that is how addictive it is for us. So it almost should be illegal for children to have these devices so readily available to them. I mean, there's not many kids, like little kids these days, that don't own an iPad. Like it is just so common. And unfortunately, like that once you have an iPad, and especially if there are no boundaries around that iPad, that child can become heavily addicted to this screen. And it's like trying to take that screen away from a child is like almost like a drug addict trying to take something off them, like that is how serious it is. And especially kids from 0 to 6 who are developing their brains. There's so much wiring and neurotransmitters firing at that age. And when we have this screen in our face, it's actually causing way more havoc than we may ever know. It's causing all sorts of crazy behavioral issues. I've seen it in my own kids, and like I remember about 5 years ago when I was in the thick of motherhood and I was using screens as a babysitter. Like I was so stretched thin because I was sleep deprived. My kids weren't sleeping. And I tell this story and it like blows my mind that I used to do this, but I was feeling so stretched with motherhood at the time that once the kids finally went to bed, I would grab out an ice cream or a chocolate bar and I would sit on the couch and watch through crazy amounts of episodes on Netflix until, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And what I would do is I'd get 2 bananas and the remote control and I would put it on the coffee table, already programmed to ABC Kids. And the kids were in a habitual, habit of just going straight to the TV in the morning because they were waking up at 5 o'clock and I did not want to wake up at 5 o'clock. And so I was in this vicious cycle. And this is the thing, a lot of parents, especially mothers, are in this vicious cycle and they don't know a way out.
Yeah, it is profoundly harmful, and before I really want you to expand on that, and maybe you can talk about this interesting post you did recently about virtual autism. But I'll make the point quickly that why is this so harmful? And I think the iPad use is not only are we blasting the baby's developing eyes and retina with this high energy visible light, which is actually next to UV. So these are high energy photons, and they cause oxidative stress and they cause death oxidative stress and death of these retinal ganglion cells. So not only are we impacting the actual potential causing vision issues, and that like leads to myopia and other conditions, but we're also obviously disrupting the circadian rhythm. And these iPads are emitting radio frequency radiation immediately. Like I've seen consult room last week that the infant was holding the iPad, on its lap. So it is irradiating its undeveloped breast tissue, its gonads, its ovaries, directly. And anyone who's looking into the non-native EMF side of health knows that this inverse square law is like we need to get these devices as far away from the body to reduce essentially irradiation as much as possible. So yeah, just to quickly make that point that this is why we should avoid giving our kids these devices. But please talk to us about the effects that you've seen and this idea of perhaps virtual autism.
Yeah, and that's a really good point you make about the non-native EMFs. It's actually a really big interest point I've had for many, many years before I even was introduced to circadian rhythms by Dr. Jack Kruse, of course. But like I would say for about the last 15 years, we turn the Wi-Fi off at nighttime. And we've been doing that for an incredibly long time. And then our entire house is now cabled, so we don't have to use Wi-Fi at all. We've just, come a long way. Yeah, that's actually a big elephant in the room. And I go quite deep into that, into my rhythm reset for kids, because it's not talked about enough, right? Like you said, there's so many different aspects for a child of having a screen in front of their face. It's causing a suppression of melatonin and dopamine as well. And, the eyes and the skin cannot differentiate between natural sunlight and artificial light. So if our kids are going to bed with an iPad, or, they're exposed to these we've got artificial suns on the roof, big bright lights, their brains are getting confused, and that's why they become wired. They get this second wind, and their bodies and brains believe that it's daytime again. And so, everything fires back up, whereas everything is meant to be winding down. And that's why we use, circadian friendly lighting, red lights and lights that don't have flicker in them, lights that don't have this artificial blue light. These are the signals, the flicker and the blue light, that's sending to the brain that it's daytime, wake up, wake up. And then we're so wondering why our kids are struggling to wind down and to fall asleep. Like, I remember my kids used to take up to 2 hours to go to bed. This is from the moment that they're in bed to actually falling asleep. And now applying all of the principles of circadian rhythms, like, I kid you not, my kids are asleep in 1 to 2 minutes or less when the light goes out. And I'm not talking about the big bright lights on the roof, because we don't use those anymore. I'm talking about, like a blue block book lamp, right? That's either red or really, dark orange. And so that promotes sleep. And that helps the brain and the body to wind down and know that it's time for sleep. And that helps the production and release of melatonin as well. And so, yeah, there's this term called virtual autism, and not to get confused with the diagnosed autism spectrum disorder, ASD, which is more of a genetic cause. Virtual autism is a term that was formulated in 2018, and it was under observation with young children. I think it was under 3, and these children showed autistic-like symptoms due to excessive screen time. So it was done with kids who were looking at screens for more than 4 hours. And, these kids, rather than engaging with the world around them and touch and movement and interacting and play, they were spending a lot of time, excessive time, in front of screens. And so this was messing with their development. It was hindering their way and ability to talk and to think and to interact with the world around them. And yeah, I was totally mind blown when I heard this term, virtual autism. But it's generally for kids, what they can see is kids under 3 who are having excessive screen time of more than 4 hours. And that does sound like a lot, but if your TV is on or the iPad is readily available for them at any time, 4 hours, really isn't that much. But that is what it is causing certain brain chemicals like melanopsin, dopamine, GABA, like all your neurotransmitters, in a deficiency in pathway that is not good for our children's development. It's causing, behavioral changes, low cognitive function, delayed speech. And I tell you what, delayed speech is a huge issue for a lot of young kids. And so, yeah, is there a direct link to screens? Like, it's definitely becoming a more common conversation, and a conversation that needs to be had more.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I think, to use an ancestral lens, if you imagine a child growing up prior to the development of electricity, which is in the late 1800s, the child would be, in around a family unit, maybe playing in outside of the grass while men are, cutting up an animal or preparing and making a net or something. The kid might be climbing over mum and dad. It's grounded. It's outside. It's experiencing completely natural light. And, when the sun goes down, maybe there's a bit of firelight, but the kid's going to be out like like a light out, like your children are when they're implementing these types of behaviors. I mean, what we're doing today is such a radical departure from that routine, and I think we do need to just join the dots from a health point of view. And commonly, it's not uncommon that in general practice we'll see a child who has having behavioral issues, whether that is a formal diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and perhaps even or often ADHD at the same time. And they've seen the pediatrician, and they just get put on melatonin. They get put on supplemental melatonin, and you can bet your bottom dollar that child is using tech, is using screens, and has an iPad as free reign of an iPad. And this is where the sympathy and the empathy comes in, is because if that child is already behaviorally difficult, you can understand why the parent might provide that for them, but they're just obviously not understanding that this could be completely exacerbating the underlying problem.
It's a complete coping mechanism for parents. I've been there, and I just don't have I don't hold any judgment. I think because I've been there, and I remember, I still feel it in my body, how it felt for me in that struggle and being so stretched as a parent because I was so sleep deprived. And I remember just, it'd get to 3-4 o'clock and I just have this pit in my stomach thinking about, I've got to go through this again tonight. The kids coming in and out constantly, not going to sleep. And I just remember that, vicious cycle of getting angry at them, feeling very unregulated. And I just wanted my time by myself. Unfortunately, it wasn't a healthy way I was spending my me time until 1 o'clock in the morning. But I didn't know at the time. And so and this is why it's so important to share and spread this message, right? I was just a mother, yes, I was a naturopath, but I was actually specializing in women's health and fertility, not in children's health at all. And then, I was hit rock bottom, and I hit complete rock bottom. I ended up, feeling very stretched, sleep deprived, but actually hurt my knee. And I had to go under emergency surgery. And I ended up being in a full leg brace for 6 weeks. And I remember saying to my husband about 2 weeks after it happened, I just said, I can't do this anymore. Something has to change. And we ended up, I said, I want to travel Australia. And he was like, what? Okay. And we just made it happen because he knew how bad of a place that I was in with my mental health, and my physical health was declining. So we made it happen. And 6 weeks later, we were on the road. And what I saw, which I didn't link at the time, but the kids started sleeping better because they were spending 80% of their time outdoors. We were in a caravan. We didn't take any tech. We traveled the entire of Australia with no tech for the kids whatsoever. And so, I didn't make the connection, but they started sleeping better. They were more regulated. They were happier. I started sleeping better. And then it was funny because about 4 weeks into the trip, I actually fell pregnant with our third baby. And then it was just after that is when I say accidentally, because I clicked onto a podcast that literally changed the whole trajectory of my life. There was a podcast that I was looking for, and I opened up my podcast app, and there was this podcast that said light, water, and magnetism. But it didn't get me. I was like, that doesn't sound very interesting. But in the brackets, it said explicit language. And I was like, that sounds interesting. I'm going to listen to that. And it was by neurosurgeon Dr. Jack Kruse. And I started listening, and within 2 minutes, my mind was blown. I didn't learn any of this in naturopathic college, nothing at all. And I just couldn't believe it. And from that moment forward, that was when I watched my very first intentional sunrise. And I say intentional because I've watched plenty of sunrises, in my early 20s after coming out the nightclub, but never actually, got up intentionally to watch a sunrise. And that was nearly 5 years ago. And I've just been completely hooked. And so my children's lives transformed, mine transformed. And then 3 years of actually living this way, I started to get more and more people asking me about, what are you doing? How are your kids so healthy? All these questions. And I got to a point was I can't not share this. I feel like it's my sacred duty now to actually share this because I know how much it can help these struggling mothers with these young children. who, aren't in thriving health like they should be in their childhood, right?
Yeah, and I think the kind of social zeitgeist is more appreciation of the role of foods, of holistic food, whole food sourcing, of nutrient dense animal foods. I think there's certain accounts in social media and Instagram that are really promoting those ideas more widely, but there is a hole for information and for education about light environment, about circadian rhythms for kids. And as you and I both know, that this is such a kind of missing piece. Can you speak to what you've noticed, speak to your routine that you follow with your family and what you teach your clients? And yeah, again, just expand on the improvements that you see with these circadian lifestyle behaviors.
Yeah, so there's so many. I just get the most incredible messages like every day over my Instagram. There's another message from a mother saying, just thank you so much. Just these simple, and this is the thing, it is really simple. It doesn't have to be hard. It's not complicated. I don't make it complicated. I don't talk about all, the biology. I keep it really simple because that is what mothers need. They don't need an extra thing, or they don't need give me a 20-page handout. I just want the simplicity of it. And so I tell them a lot of stories about my family, what we do. I think that's what people love, is like I share from a real life aspect, like what we do on a daily basis. And so, yeah, like we wake up naturally with the sun, the first thing that my kids say is, I want to go outside. My 3-year-old is like the epitome of what I would call a circadian kid. He was the one I was 16 weeks pregnant with when I listened to that podcast. And so I watched from 16 weeks pregnant every single sunrise. And I was out in the daylight sunshine for 4 to 6 hours a day, bare feet on the earth. All my eating rhythms were in sync with the sunrise to sunset, blocked blue light at night. And this kid was born the minute the sun came up. I kid you not. He's a sunrise baby, and he has just been a dream. And, third child and all quite close together, like most mothers are quite stretched in that time when you've got 3 little children. And I absolutely thrived and still am with 3 kids. And that's because I honor, the light dark cycles with our whole family. We all do it together. And I want to talk into this because it's not always easy to make these changes. It's definitely easier with little kids, I will tell you that. Once they get a bit older, to try and change habits is a bit harder. Partners, husbands, yes, a little bit trickier. But, if it's just these micro changes, it's these small little changes. Get the kids out first thing in the morning. It's the first thing that we do. We always say, sunlight before artificial light. So we get up in the morning, and if the sun's not up, because in the winter, it's not always up when the kids wake up, we have the red lights. If you're on the video, you can see behind me, I've got a red strip in the kitchen. It's a blue blocking red strip. So there's no flicker, there's no artificial light, and it allows the kids to wake up more naturally and not this heightened state of, you wake up and the bright lights are on and their internal circadian rhythms are just like gone haywire the moment they've woken up, and that heightens their nervous system. And so when they walk outside, that beautiful infrared light, that morning sunlight is just so potent for our children, their brains and their bodies, and that, production of that first production of their melatonin. And, I didn't know this. I didn't understand that when I was putting my kids in front of the TV before the sun was even up, I had no idea that was affecting their hormone production and affecting their sleep at nighttime. Like, no one ever told me that. And that is why I love to get this message out. And so, yeah, the kids go out and the first thing they do is ground their feet. They jump on. We have this huge funky monkey bar at the front, which is like 2 big monkey bars. It's a big flying fox. We've made the front yard very enticing for the kids to go out, right? Because kids are not going to go outside if there's nothing to do or play. We have a tree that they can climb in. We've got grass that they can play footy and cricket. Like, we make it very entertaining for them because, I think the thing is with parents, and toys, houses are so overstimulated, with toys and gadgets, that kids actually don't want to go outside. they're happy inside because there's so many things going on. The things that I did early on was like, get rid of the toy room. Get rid of the toy room. And when we buy things for them for their birthdays, it's all to do with outdoor play. That is one of the keys to get the kids outside more. And I tell you what, we live in one of the hottest places in Australia. And so there's no excuse that the kids, it's too hot outside. Like, our kids are still outside, they adapt as well. And yes, it does get very hot and very sweaty, but the kids are used to being outside, right? They're used to climbing trees and they want to be outside. It's like a natural, a kid's life force, right? Like, we are all connected. We are all nature, but kids, they are less conditioned. They're more connected to nature than adults are. And so that is literally their life force. That is their energy force. And so they need to be outside more. So yeah, we have breakfast outside, and then the kids go to a school just a street away from us. So we always walk or ride to school, get their bodies active. And then as soon as they get home, it's like they have a little rhythm. I'm all about rhythms. I think it's really important to have predictability of what's going on in their lives. And it's they get their shoes off, uniforms off, lunch boxes on bench, and they're straight outside, either jumping in the pool or they're on the funky monkey bar, but it's always outside. And they have about 4 hours of sunlight until the sun goes down. And then it's dinner. Dinner is always done before sunset, always, because that allows a kid's digestion to really, their metabolism to really wind down properly. A kid going to bed with a full stomach, is really going to struggle to have good quality sleep. And let alone, so many kids these days are eating dinner under artificial light, which we know is affecting the way that they're actually metabolizing their food as well. So this is the basics of our rhythm is getting the kids outside as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very, very good routine. And to summarize quickly, that'll be get your kids outdoors, seeing sunlight before any kind of screens, maximize the amount of time that they're spending outdoors in natural light, eating the meals outdoors, obviously seeing sunrise and sunset if you can, and eating and finishing those last meals well before sleep. I like to tell people at least 3 to 4 hours, and some people who have difficulty sleeping find that pairing that sleeping time back to 3 p.m., 2 p.m., going all the way back to before noon can even make real improvements in sleep quality. And just to really emphasize the point is that morning light does contain a little bit of blue. It contains enough blue to give us a bit of cortisol spike to start the day, in natural blue, but it's always paired with red and infrared. And that is in stark contrast to the artificial blue that the kid is going to get if they flick on Looney Tunes, Cartoon Network. I don't know what kids watch these days. But that is confusing, is causing circadian rhythm disruption. And we know from the literature is just growing longer and longer and longer in terms of the number of conditions that are associated with circadian rhythm disruption. And you mentioned mistimed meals. In adults, that's a risk factor for developing insulin resistance, depositing visceral fat, because fundamentally the gut clocks are uncoupled. They're desynchronized from the master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So I want to make the point that this is not unfounded in its scientific evidence. This is well documented throughout the literature. I mean, this was the 2017 Nobel Prize, was for mechanisms related to the molecular clock operation. So this is not something that can be dismissed, but the innovation that you're doing, Jess, is translating this message for normal people who don't have a scientific background, who don't have a biomedical research background, who don't understand the clock genes and don't need to, how to benefit their health. So that's a really amazing stuff. Do you mind sharing again just some stories of some of the clients that you've seen, and maybe perhaps ones that have had pre-existing behavioral issues, whether that's ADHD or ASD, autism?
Yeah, there's so many amazing ones, but there's always one that really sticks out for me. And this was at the beginning of the year. Beautiful mother who came into my Rhythm Reset for Kids, and she's got 2 boys, And the eldest boy, who was 9, he is on the autistic spectrum, and he, for many, many years, had to regulate himself with a screen when he first woke up. So he had an iPad next to his bed. He'd wake up, he'd go to the screen first thing, and he'd be on it for about half an hour up to an hour. And then he'd come out and greet the family. And that's also how he went to bed as well. And the mother was just like, this is just how he regulates himself, and I don't know another way. However, it's causing all of these, anger and outbursts, and, he's becoming recluse, and, he's not coming out and speaking or playing with his younger brother. And so we just implemented and tweaked a few little things to their rhythm. And this is the thing, like this is really easy. It doesn't have to be hard. And all we got him to do was his mother to invite him outside in the morning. So he woke up and she went in there first thing and said, hey, I've got something to show you. Do you want to come out and have a look? And they went outside, bare feet on the ground. The sun was just coming up. They were literally out there for less than 2 minutes, right? And he came back inside and his dad said, I don't have any milk. I need to go to the shops. And this young boy said, I'll go to the shops. It was literally just across the road. He'd never done it before. He'd never, ever put his hand up to do anything. And the mum and dad looked at each other and were just like, okay, all right, let's do it, sure. And so he went across to the shops. He got the milk and he also got himself a juice. And the mum was like, oh my goodness, his younger brother is going to, completely lose it because he doesn't have his other brother juice. And he came back in and his younger brother was like, oh my God, I am so proud of you. You just went to the shops all by yourself. And he had the biggest smile on his face and he forgot about the screen. He didn't go to the screen. And then he sat down and had breakfast with the family. And she said this is the first time that he has done it in years, and he had an amazing day. And then she has just got an incredible transformation ever since. That was day 1. And then she came through the 4-week program with me. And by the end of it, she was a completely different person because she was spending more time outside as well. This is the thing, like adults aren't spending enough time outside. And we actually need to get out there with the kids too. So she bought the kids a little tent. I think they live in the UK, bought them a little tent, and they would just play for hours and hours in and out the tent, in the backyard, kicking the ball, now getting out puzzles outside, whereas they never really, the kids, the 2 boys, didn't really interact with each other before. They didn't really play together. And now that's all they do. And so I just like that testimony in itself is what drove me to keep going. Because initially I was like, what am I really sharing anything useful? Like, yeah, it helped my family, but can it really help any other family? And that testimony was just like, right, I need to keep doing this. I need to keep sharing this. This is my motivator. And honestly, there has been so many amazing stories since. I have a whole folder on my desktop of just like up to nearly 100 testimonies from, I only started sharing this not even 18 months ago, and really only more interactive in the last probably 9-10 months. And it's like, this is the thing. It's just the simple changes to a child's rhythm, getting them out for that morning light, getting them away from screens more, getting them outside for a minimum of 2 hours of sunshine a day, blocking blue light at night, eating within, the sunrise and sunset. And these simple changes can literally just build the foundations to a healthy and happy childhood and leading right into adulthood too.
Yeah, that's amazing. The effect of 2 minutes of unprotected morning sunlight in the eye. I think it illustrates very, very well and the power of simply just giving the nervous system, your brain, which is in the eyes, which is an extension of the brain, these light signals and this what we call the most important zeitgeber, which is the timekeeper. I want to make a couple comments about autism really quickly. You mentioned earlier in terms of its susceptibility, potentially there's a genetic component, but compared to its historical incidence, we're at one. I believe the U.S. statistics 1 in 36 currently, and have a diagnosis. And historically, it was completely unknown. That really does hint to a more epigenetic or environmental cause, and it's an extremely controversial topic in some regards. But again, pointing to the work of Dr. Cruz, it favors this idea of artificial light and blue light affecting neuronal migration. And that is essentially causing what is known as an atavistic kind of regression, almost in terms of human behavior. And for anyone interested, I encourage you to read his blog post on autism, which he actually wrote for Nicole Shanahan, who is the vice president nominee with RFK Jr. on their US political ticket. But there's other very intelligent people talking about autism, and Stephanie Seneff and her work with glyphosate and industrial herbicide contamination is one of them. And the other ones which I think there's increasing evidence for could be, again, deuterium and potentially polyunsaturated fatty acids like linoleic acid from seed oils. So I mean, I think, and then RFK, anyone who's followed RFK will know his perspective in terms of the causes, but that's not a topic that we're going to discuss. So I mean, the crux of the matter is that we can improve these symptoms and potentially delay or prevent them by just getting the light signals right.
Yeah, yes, it really can be that simple, is managing a child's light environment at night, including the light that they're exposed to, but also the screens. Like, even if we just focused on that one area, light environment for our children, like we could see our kids go leap and bounds just from focusing on that one area. And then when we bring in the morning infrared light and then more sunlight, like that is how our biology is meant to work, right? Like we were not meant to live indoors. Yeah. Like we are meant to live outdoors. Like that is how our biology works, in partnership with the sun and nature. And so the more that we live in these like concrete bunkers, the sicker that we are becoming, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's, again, we don't need a PhD to realize that, but sometimes we need to have this explained in a simple way, like you're doing. Can you speak to sunglasses and sunscreen? And I imagine that those are two topics that maybe mums are concerned about. How do you talk and discuss that topic? How do you explain about those two topics to people?
Yeah, so we live in the Pilbara, Western Australia, and we literally live in the hottest part of Australia, right? And we don't use sunscreen. And so people are like, sunscreen? Occasionally we use a little bit of just zinc oxide when we go out in the boat, which is usually just for underneath the eyes and on the nose. But otherwise, we do not use sunscreen. But what I do use as a mother is I use my intuition, right? Like, and I think this is a big part of what we have completely disconnected from is our own intuition, the own sensations on our skin. Like, we know you can actually, when you first start, this whole circadian life is there's amazing apps that you can use to check the UV and all of that. But if we just come back to sensations on our skin, what is our skin type as well? We all have the same skin type in our family. But I tell you what, when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I would walk outside and get burnt. And that was because I wore sunglasses from about 12 years of age. And that moment that I listened to that podcast, I took those sunnies off and I have never worn them since. And that was nearly 5 years ago. But when I did, because we live in the hottest part of Australia, my eyesight, I didn't realize how bad it was, from wearing sunglasses for so long. And so I had to do it gradually. I had to expose my eyes first to that morning infrared light. And I had to I would still keep my sunglasses on my head everywhere I would go because it was just habitual. I would literally walk in the door, put them on my head. Before I walked out, the sunglasses went on, right? And so I took the sunnies off but I was getting burnt quite badly in my teenage years and my 20s. But I was also not exposing my skin or my eyes to that morning light, right? Which helps to build our solar callus. And that is important to not get burnt. And, I just think about my 20s. I worked in construction. I worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I didn't see the sun for 6 days. And then on the Sunday, I would go to the beach and I would get burnt within the first 20 minutes of being there. Now I do not get burnt at all. My kids don't get burnt at all. We expose our solar panels, our skin and our eyes as much as possible to that first morning light every single morning. And that helps to build our solar callus. And, that is the foundation of, having, it's obviously looks good, having a healthy tan, but that is what's going to stop us from burning our skin too. And so, talk about sunglasses, like, the amount of kids you see these days with sunnies on, it's just like it's a fashion statement, once you get into that preteens, but also young kids and babies, the amount of like little kids I see with sunglasses. And I think it's just everyone's doing it. Oh, we live here. This is, what you have to do. You have to wear lots of sunscreen. You have to wear sunglasses to protect your skin and your eyes. But it's actually opposite to that. That is opposite to what we should be doing. And when I took my sunnies off and I started exposing my skin and my eyes to that morning light, everything changed for me. My hormones started to, I actually had a great menstrual cycle from there on in. I, didn't get burnt. I could be out in the sun I can be out in the sun for 6 hours and not get burnt. But use your intuition, like when it's a high UV, like it's 15 plus in the summer here of a UV. And so I always let the kids pretty much be out at the beach almost naked for probably the first 20 minutes. And then I'll put a hat on them. Then they'll put their fishing shirts on. We always take a big shade to the beach. It's like being sun responsible, I think, is what's really important, and using your intuition. But yeah, the first thing is getting out in that morning light, that beautiful infrared light. That is what's going to prime and prep your skin and your body to prevent you from getting burnt.
Yeah, great advice. And if anyone wants to dive into the actual physiology of this, I've addressed it in previous podcasts, but essentially there's a neuroendocrine loop that orchestrates pigmentation and the immediate pigment response, and it links the ocular sensation of different light wavelengths to the cutaneous sensation through the non-visual photoreceptor system, amongst other mechanisms that allows the skin to pigment appropriately based on the ambient ultraviolet conditions. So we're really hamstringing that process when we're using sunglasses and sunscreens too. And because we live in Australia and we do have amongst the highest incidence of skin cancers in the world, because we're mismatched in amongst other reasons compared to the native population. So we just need to be smart, and the smartest way to do that is using shade and recognizing that you've got a mismatch of your skin type to the ambient conditions, and do exactly as you're mentioning, is simply just go inside or go into shade if you've had enough for your skin type. So I think that's a great way, I think, of helping people understand. And I shudder to think about the neurodevelopmental of development of these children who are having no UV light, because not only are they having that artificial blue during the night and during inside time, but they're also being deprived of UV light, which their bodies need to make pro-opiomelanocortin. And if you again follow Dr. Jack Kruse's work, that is the gene that essentially sculpted us as Homo sapiens. So it's something that's a very important topic that I'm glad you're also discussing and talking about.
Yeah, and it's like the foundation for setting up a healthy circadian rhythm for our kids is sunlight. You can't, do all these things but not get your kids out in the sunlight, because that is, for a minimum of 2 hours a day. That's what preps and primes their brains and bodies for all the, these beautiful pathways of melatonin and dopamine and all the neurotransmitters that are needed for a happy, healthy kid, for a kid that has really good quality sleep. These are just the foundations of children's health. This is the simple foundations of a child's health, but it's not talked about enough. I started this 5 years ago, and I remember searching on the net and Instagram and everywhere. I was like, someone's going to be talking about this, but no one was. And then it wasn't until 3 years later where I was like, Jess, people were saying you need to start sharing this. And I was like, no, I reckon that someone's sharing it already. And I researched for like a week, and I was like, why is no one talking about this for our kids? It's become quite more well-known and popular with adults, but not our kids. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to start sharing this, and it's been like the reception of it has been amazing. Like people just like, wow, this feels like the missing link, this is the thing that I've been looking for that I didn't even know I was looking for.
Yeah, amazing. Maybe to finish off, you did an amazing post recently just talking about sleep and calculating the appropriate amount of sleep for infants, for toddlers, for children, for adolescents. Maybe just talk through that graphic that you posted, and explain that just conceptually. I think that would be a benefit for people.
Yeah, so this was just like in reference, I think from sleepfoundation.org. And, because kids just aren't getting enough sleep these days. And that is the foundation of their health. Like, if you're not getting enough sleep for any human, then, we just don't have the opportunity to heal and to rest and to digest. And, that is the time when our body and growth, like
Prevent
development, like,
cancer.
yeah, there's so much happening. And yeah, when our kids are deprived of melatonin through blue light toxicity and excessive screens, like they're not getting the good quality sleep that they really need. And interestingly, there's not a whole lot of sleep specialists that are actually talking about this. So I think most of the mothers that come and see me and ask for help are kids, around the age of like 3 to 9. And so that's kind of like, preschool. I would say probably most of them are around even 3 to 6. Like, and, kids that are around that age should be having around 10 to 13 hours of sleep. And some people be like, what? Like, there's no way my kid would sleep 12 hours a night. My kids never used to sleep that long, right? Going back when I had 2 children. They would be lucky to get 6 hours of broken sleep a night. And that is actually really common for a lot of kids these days. And so, but now my kids who are ages 4, 7, and 9, all just had a birthday, they now sleep, all actually pretty much the same. From the 3-year-old to the 9-year-old, they're all sleeping at least 12 hours. I would say the 3-year-old probably sleeps 13 hours. But the 7 and 9-year-old are both sleeping 12 hours as well. And so their recommended sleep through the Sleep Foundation is around, the 10, 11 hour mark. And they're sleeping, I would say, 11 to 12 hours a night. Solid sleep too, like they're not waking up and, needing to, go to the toilet, or they're not waking up and like taking hours to go back to sleep, which is what it used to be like in our household. They sleep solid. And the only thing that we changed was their light environment and how much time they spent outside. If you look at it real simply, like they are the 2 foundations, the 2 principles of circadian rhythms that had the most impact with our kids.
Yeah, it is remarkable that more people aren't talking about it, and as you mentioned, sleep consultants aren't talking about it, and sleep physicians. People, adult patients get referred to a sleep physician for insomnia, and they're actually not being told the most basic tenets of this circadian rhythm and the circadian biology that you and I have discussed. And typically that ends up looking like in adults, when children, it looks like a melatonin prescription, and in adults it's either melatonin or something else, something heavier prescription, when the patient hasn't even been told that they should see the morning sunrise to help, again, promote their endogenous melatonin. So yeah, it's a weird world that we're living in, that you and I are having to say this, because it should be common knowledge, and it should be first line advice from all health practitioners.
Yeah, and melatonin is like it is literally an epidemic. And it's like, we're speaking about Australia, for example. These kids who are having serious sleep issues, like you said, insomnia as well, and they're prescribed melatonin supplements. But I remember Dr. Jack Kruse saying one time that the human body, right, is meant to absorb all frequencies of sunlight throughout the day, through the eyes and the skin. And so melatonin production starts in the morning when we expose our eyes and skin to that first morning light, and it's made up of, various different UV light frequencies. But artificially created melatonin does not contain these specific light signaling frequencies. And it ends up in the gut, and essentially no circadian rhythm control. So we don't know what effect this artificial melatonin is actually having on our kids long term, or what effect it's having on their natural production of melatonin as well. Like it doesn't contain what infrared light does contain, which naturally starts our production of melatonin. So there's a lot that we don't understand, but we do know that artificial melatonin can potentially cause and harm the way that our natural production of melatonin works.
Yeah, look, it's an area that needs more research, that's for sure. I mean, traditionally it's supposedly has a quite wide therapeutic index and well tolerated, but whenever we're kind of, yeah, as you mentioned, introducing a hormone that our body is making, we really have to ask what is the downstream effect. And some have suggested that's retinal thinning. I haven't seen any hard data, but I'm open to the possibility that there's some, quite serious negative effect. And look, and again, not to harbor to labor the point, but that kid also who isn't sleeping during the day, maybe they during the night and get an ADHD diagnosis and have to be on melatonin. That's also to medicate the alertness that they've experienced because they've been prescribed dexamphetamine for their ADHD. So the medication cycle of a stimulant and then a hypnotic agent is starting from very, very young age. And I've even seen kids who are prescribed risperidone and antipsychotic medications for behavioral control. And again, it's coming back to these fundamental inputs like light and processed food too. That's to some degree. So yeah, we can't overstate how important this is. And I think maybe a parting message for the listeners is to just give it a try. Like, there's so little to lose by just getting your family out and following the advice that Jess has shared and see what happens. But the other point, and you alluded to it, is that this actually takes the adults to change. It takes mom and dad to actually lead the way, because the kids are going to follow what mom and dad are doing.
Yeah, my kids didn't listen to that podcast. They didn't change over the lights to blue blocking lights. Like, they didn't do any of that. It takes the responsibility of the parent to do that. And it can be hard to change habits. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. But if we just if we take micro changes, like change one thing a week, we can make it really easy for ourselves. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Like, oh my God, I got to change my lights. I got to do this and I got to do that. Like we've been living this life for nearly 5 years and we're still evolving, there's still things that we're adapting to, or new lights that we're buying or whatever it might be, changing over some lights. Like, there's still always something, right? But it's keep it really simple, change one thing. And I think that is the answer to this, because we have become so disconnected from our natural rhythms and from nature that it's not going to happen overnight to get back to a place that we were. And we don't want to be where our ancestors once were, but we want to adopt some of those principles and the way that we used to live. We want to bring that into this tech, driven world that we live in now. We have to, because our biology is never going to change, right? It doesn't matter how much AI comes into this life that we live. Our biology will never change. It will always work in partnership with the sun. And we need the right type of light for our bodies to thrive. That is period, right? That is fact. And we can't ignore that. And I think that the more that we share this message, the more that people will be literal light bulb moments. Oh, of course. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, you're right. The design specification of Homo sapiens and it's our reliance on solar energy and the circadian cycle, with its 3.4 billion year history, is not going to change no matter what brain machine interface gets invented. So yes, that's a very, very wise words and a great place to finish. Just tell us where people can connect with you. Say they've listened to this, they think, wow, maybe I could definitely make some change, but would want some guidance. How can they get in touch with you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, so you can jump over to my Instagram, which is just at circadian.kids. That's pretty much where I hang out. I also have a community over on my free Facebook group. But have developed this program called the Rhythm Reset for Kids, and I offer it twice a year. And I just, it created itself. It was basically what the mothers needed, what they were struggling with their kids. And I've basically brought the principles of circadian rhythms together And I just make it very simple and just explain it very simple. I go into a little bit of the biology, but not much, because we don't actually need to know all that, right? Like, we just need to know that actually we need to get our kids outside more and off screens more, and like block blue light at night. We can keep it really simple. And I keep it really simple, especially for mothers who have, you know, these heightened states of nervous systems and just don't have the energy or the capacity to be able to do one more thing. And so I just basically help to invite small micro changes each week for 4 weeks. And that's in the Rhythm Reset for Kids. You can check out my bio in my Instagram page. There's information on there when it comes up again.
Amazing. We'll share that in the show notes. So Jess, thank you so much for sharing all this information with the listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.